What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Stochastic NHL Strategy Show. I am your host, Josh Harris. Josh is in the kitchen making pasta. That's usually where I am. I make my pasta in the kitchen. I certainly don't make it in the bedroom, but I do make my own pasta a lot. You could. If you're making it in bulk, I would recommend the bathtub, actually, but make all my pastas. Anyway, nice little 7-gamer. Nice that, okay, we're going to be here every day this week, and that's a bit taxing for us. But the slate sizes this week have been very accommodating, we'll say. 5 games yesterday, 7 games today. I would much rather have these weeks than 1 game on Monday, 14 on Tuesday, 3 on Wednesday, 13 on, you know what I mean? So 7-game slate's right up my alley. This is my favorite size slate. I like this slate. I usually don't like anything. So I'm feeling weird, and gonna need Cliffy. What's going on?
Not a whole lot. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like that 6 to 9 game range, I think that's kind of what I prefer. 7 today, I think it's 4 tomorrow. It's like 10 on Thursday, but then it's like 5 on Friday, maybe 7 on Saturday or something. So yeah, it's pretty reasonable across the board. Kind of an interesting slate last night. You either had Dallas 2 or you didn't. That's what happens on short slates. I was lucky to roster Dallas 2, had a pretty good night. No thanks to Colorado. That kind of killed me. I did have Dallas 2 with Heiskanen and Ottinger. But I also had McKinnon and Lehkonen with Brady Shea. Didn't get a lot from them. Not going to complain about last night, though. It was my best night of the season, so always good. What I will get upset with is Dallas scoring 6 first-period goals and then forcing me to watch the Philadelphia Flyers and San Jose Sharks after that.
Yeah.
I mean, it actually wasn't that bad of a game, so I shouldn't complain too much, but I do try to I value my free time a little bit higher than that. But yeah, you had Dallas or you didn't. That's kind of the way it goes. Carolina, second line, went absolute ham in the late game, but I don't think a lot of people would have had Dallas 2 and Carolina 2 because you would have been leaving like 10 grand on the table. So, we'll take it. Move ahead to tonight's slate. Tonight's slate is pretty interesting. Only one team on a back-to-back, I think, and that is Calgary. Not a lot of high-end options. You do have Edmonton at home, but Austin Matthews isn't playing for Toronto. You have Winnipeg and the Rangers, but you have Connor Hellebuyck and Igor Shesterkin in that game. Devils and Florida, 2 pretty good defensive teams. Boston and St. Louis, which is one of those, like, if you lose a bet, you have to watch this game type of games. But pretty wide open slate, I think. There's one cheap, super chalky option that we'll talk about later. But other than that, I think it's fairly wide open.
Did you swap to Heiskanen after the Dumba news came out? Or
yes.
Did you have him in originally?
No, I swapped to Heiskanen. I swapped to Heiskanen and Dallas after we found out that Dumba wasn't playing. That's how little I think. That's how much I think he's hurting this team offensively. So I was willing to just completely swap my entire lineup because he wasn't playing.
I was like, okay, I could see him playing Dallas 2. He was high in Dallas 2, but Miro Heiskanen, that had to come after the Dumba news and he, Dumba may never see the ice again now that Miro scored 2 goals yesterday. But
I mean, it's just, like I said on Twitter, it's just really funny that they healthy scratch him and then they bang out 6 goals in like 16 minutes or something like that. It's like, maybe the coach will get the hint here.
The poor Harley, he got saddled with Lyubushkin last night, but
at least it's doable. At least, like, it's not ideal, but it's playable. Because I think Lyubushkin is just kind of like a diet Esa Lindell anyway. But like Dumba, he probably shouldn't get back in the lineup unless there's an injury, and that means Brendan Smith playing every game. That's how much I think. That's how bad I think Dumba has been this season.
I mean, Brendan Smith had a multi-point game, multi-point first period. Brandon Smith, and now we have Frostback coming in. Say good data flow chart. Like, what are we doing here today? Like, we are off the rocker. We're not even 7 minutes in. Yeah, Kevin. But you know who's not going to healthy scratch Ryan Lindgren? The Rangers. And we'll get to that game, and I am fired up about it. But let's get into this slate. Before we do, just want to say thank you guys for all your support via the affiliates, via all the just showing up, watching the show, leaving a like, all that good stuff. If you're still not a member and you're looking to go premium, we'll never like say, oh yeah, you got to go premium. If you don't have the money, I'm not going to make you do it. But if you are looking to go premium, click that link in the chat. You can use promo code Stochastic15. That will give you 15% off your first month or week subscription. So thank you. Let's get into this slate as my internet decides to go poo-poo. Ottawa Senators with a 2.9 total heading into Toronto. The Leafs have a 3 total. I'm going to assume you guys can hear me okay. I might look a little frozen, but I look fine.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
There we go. All right. So, yeah, Pacioretty is out. So Bobby McMahon moves up onto the second line with Tavares and Nylander. There's questions if Nylander and Domi were going to play, but Berube said they're both in tonight. So they're going to go Tavares, Nylander, McMahon, Marner, Nyes, Domi. Ottawa going Kachuk, Norris, Grieg, Stützle, Batherson, Giroux, and then Pinto, Amadio, Gregor. This Toronto line, Tavares, Nylander, is one of the chalkier spots on the night, and it's not really surprising. They've been at least they've been producing well. I don't know if they're actually playing well. Pacioretty being out, like McMahon's nice. But like Pacioretty had looked really
well. Looks like Josh's internet is acting up again. Oh, you're back. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my internet. There we go. Yeah, the Tavares amulet's working. Who would have known? Not Matthews, apparently. He's still out, but here, I'm back. I unplugged my Ethernet. Sometimes my Ethernet actually just destroys my internet, so I'm going off the Wi-Fi. But yeah, Toronto 2 is an interesting play because they're 17-7. You get Tavares and Nylander on the top power play unit. You know, Ottawa's penalty kill has been struggling. It might have gotten better since Zub came back, but it's such a small sample that you don't really know yet. I'm fine with Toronto here. I don't love them. I think the issue for me is I've watched them play, and Tavares just looks so slow. So I don't know if I want to, you know. Oh, that's why my internet's bad, because you guys are plugging in stuff. But I just don't know if I want to play that ownership when I can get other lines who are cheaper or a little bit more expensive that I like a bit better. They're fine. You want to go to Nyes, Marner, Domi. Like, honestly, at that point, I'm just going to one-off Mitch Marner. And that's saying something because Mitch Marner sucks. But, like, I'd one-off Marner. I'd one-off Nylander. I don't think I would full stack anything. Maybe I'd do some sort of power play stack, but I'm not super high on the Leafs here. And it's just insane for that to come out of my mouth because the Senators are bad. But I prefer the Senators here. And they're getting less ownership. Excuse me. And they're a little bit cheaper. Yeah, the top 2 stack is a little bit lower, but Norris, Kachuk, Grieg at 16.5, 5.8% projected ownership, 4%. Or 5.8% top 2 stack, 4% projected ownership. It's a good power play matchup. It's a good 5-on-5 matchup. And without without Matthews playing, Brady Tkachuk is probably the best player on the ice. I'm sure Leafs fans will get mad about me not saying Nylander is, but I think it's Brady Tkachuk. I like that line. I also like Stützle, Batherson, Giroux. I think you can power play stack the Sens. It's not overly expensive. I prefer the Sens side here. There is absolute merit to playing the Leafs here. Don't get me wrong. I just think in my single entry, I'm probably fading the Leafs. I'd play the Tavares Nylander line if I had to. You put a gun to my head, say you're playing the Leafs tonight. It'd be Tavares Nylander. But in MME, I think you can take a stand here. You either go a little bit under, you go way over, something like that. But this is a Sens game for me, and we're starting off strong.
Yeah, I think I might be a little bit higher on Toronto than you. The big reason is the Ottawa penalty kill that you mentioned. It has generally struggled pretty hard this season. They're giving up the 8th most shot attempts against per 60, 6th most shots against per 60, bottom 10 by goals against. And the Toronto power play looked pretty bad through like the first 10 games or 12 games or whatever. A lot of that was just shooting percentage driven. Like if you look at Toronto's power play numbers through the first 12 games when Matthews was still in the lineup, the shots were fine. The shot were good. The shot locations were good. Sometimes you just go into a cold snap. Now, do I find it really funny that the power play is suddenly exploding with Matthews injured? Yes, I find it actually really funny. But the power play was producing well. They just weren't scoring. And I know scoring is what matters in DFS, obviously, but you have to look at what's going on under the hood to see if they were struggling because they weren't generating anything, or were they struggling because, they had a bad few weeks by shooting percentages. And the reality is that they just had a bad few weeks by shooting percentages. In fact, if you look at Toronto's power play numbers, the limited time without Matthews, they're actually shooting more without Matthews. They're generating more shots without Matthews. Now, obviously, they're generating a lot more goals. What is it, like 5 power play goals in the last 3 games or something like that? I really like some sort of Toronto power play stack here. A big reason why is Marner's not that expensive. Nylander, 7,300. Like we saw him in the 8s for most of last season, if not pushing 9K. And I wrote up William Nylander in the picks article today. Free to read over at Stokastic.com. Just head on over to the NHL section and you can read up my thoughts on some of the top plays from today's slate. What I mentioned is that in the 3 games without Matthews, he's averaging 1933 per game against just 1801 in his first 10 games of the season. And after posting 1 shot in the first 2 games of the year, he's averaged 3.78 shots in his last 14 games, which is basically bang on his shot per game volume from last season. So he's getting more ice time. He's shooting a lot more. Tavares' shooting percentage has rebounded. Tavares is at like 3.8 shots per game as well. Marner's probably going to play like 21 minutes. I really like some sort of Toronto power play stack. I think if I leave someone off, it would be nice. But on a 7-game slate in a pretty good power play matchup, I like the idea of just full-on stacking Toronto's power play. I think that's how I'd attack it tonight. I'm not super interested in playing Max Domi. I'm not super interested in playing Bobby McMahon. If you want to one-off McMahon because he's on that line and he's relatively cheap, I think that's fine. But if I'm stacking Toronto here tonight, I'm stacking the power play guys. On the Ottawa side, I think I agree with you on Ottawa 1. Like Ottawa 2, I think is perfectly fine. In fact, I think there's a non-zero chance that at the end of this game that Stützle and Giroux have the most ice time of any of the Ottawa skaters. But Tkachuk and Norris, believe it or not, have actually been able to generate pretty good expected goals, or above average expected goals at least, per 60 over their last 2 seasons. Tkachuk and Norris both on the top power play unit. Toronto's penalty kill has been pretty average. Toronto's taken a ton of penalties as well. Toronto's at 3.9 times shorthanded per game. It's the second most in the league, behind only Boston. Ottawa might get a lot of power plays here tonight. Obviously, Tkachuk and Norris both figure in pretty heavily to that Ottawa power play. And also, Toronto's using Domi and Marner in a shutdown role. And that line is not good defensively. Going back to last year, Domi and Marner on the same line together, 2.9 expected goals against, 2.7 actual goals against. per 60 at 5-on-5. Those are below average numbers. So
most
Ottawa,
of that is with Matthews. Most of that samples with Matthews.
Yeah, that too. So I don't think this is a good matchup for that Ottawa top line. I agree with you. I think both Ottawa top lines are in play here, but I like Tkachuk, Norris, and Greig. I like their 5-on-5 matchup. You get 2 out of 3 on the top power play unit. Tkachuk, maybe he's having one of those seasons where instead of shooting 10%, he shoots 50%, and all of a sudden he's scoring 53 goals or something like that. Like that, players have seasons like that all the time. I like Ottawa 1 here. I think my favorite part of this game is a Toronto power play stack of some sort, but I think Ottawa 1 is definitely in play.
Yeah, I mean, like ownership agnostic. I agree with you. Toronto power play stack is your best avenue to points. You throw in the low ownership on Ottawa 1 and how bad the Leafs penalty kill has been struggling. I mean, I have a soft spot for the Sens in DFS. All of my top 5 biggest DFS wins have come with the Senators. I probably should send line matching quick party, a signed jersey or something. But like, yeah, no, I hate the Leafs and I like using the Sens. But yeah, no. But I do agree that after I went on that rant yesterday about ownership not mattering, me citing ownership for the Leafs is a bit whatever that word is. Hypocritical, but
okay, I had no idea what word you were going for there.
Me either. My brain doesn't either. It was a little bit hypocritical, but sometimes I got to be to make my points. You know why? I'm fired up about this game. So let's get to it so I can calm down. The Winnipeg Jets with a 2.9 total heading into Madison Square Garden. The Rangers have a 3.1 total. The Rangers going Panarin, Zibanejad, Lafreniere, Trocheck, Kreider, Riley Smith, Hedl, Cooley, Kako. Jets going Connor, Scheifele, Velarde, Ehlers, Perfidi, Nemestikov, Niederreiter, Lowry, Appleton. I'm not super upset that Lavalette is leaving these lines together. They're giving Zibanejad and Panarin a chance to make it work. Will it work? No. But they're at least trying. Because over the past few years, they try it for 2 games and they're like, this is idiotic. And then they break it up. They're at least giving them a little bit larger sample. And Cliffy made a good point about Lafreniere at this stage in his career. Maybe they can put Mika on their shoulders. I'm fine with Trocheck, Kreider, Smith. The issue that I have with the coach right now is their defensive pairings. I don't know why they're sending out Miller or Trouba against top comp. They got caved. They got run over against the Wings the other night. The only reason they won that game is because of John Quick, which is an insane sentence to mutter in 2024. Even the Fox-Lindgren pairing got run over because Lindgren, whether he's hurt, whether he's just turning into Dan Girardi before our eyes, he's just not good at. Their best pairing was Jones and Schneider, and they only played 16 minutes. Now I understand that they want to shelter Jones, but Schneider and Trouba were actually good to start this season, and they broke them up for I don't know. If you're going to send Trouba out against top competition, put Braden Schneider with him and put Keandre Miller with Fox. Until that happens, they're going to have to get saved by their goaltenders. And this is the flowchartiest flowchart game of all time because the flowchart says if the Winnipeg Jets are in a bad spot, you play them. And on paper, this is a bad spot. The Rangers are 9-3-1, and everyone's acting like they haven't won a game this season, but they are atrocious defensively the way that the team is set up. The Winnipeg one is 20,000 even at 10,000 or 20,000 even, 10.8% top 2 stack, 2.1% projected ownership. It is Shesterkin confirmed, and that does give me a little pause here. But if you're going to give me that line going out all game against Trouba and these Rangers lines, I have to have some interest in Winnipeg 1 here. Now, that also gives me a lot of interest in Igor Shesterkin, and we'll obviously get to goalies at the end. But At 2.1% and 20K on the road, they're overpriced. And I'm not saying go out and play them in single entry, but if I was making 20 lineups, I would have 2 of 20 easily with Winnipeg 1 here. This team, you cannot understate how bad this Rangers team is defensively. Like, they're awful. So I have to consider Winnipeg 1 here. Will I get to them in single entry? I don't think so because of their price, but the ownership is good. Outside of Igor Shesterkin, the matchup is good. So I do like Winnipeg 1 here. You want to one-off Nikolai Ehlers because he's on the power play, that's fine. On the flip side, I don't have a ton of interest in the Rangers. Like, Panarin, Zibanejad, Lafreniere, like, they're okay. They have 11.1% top 2 stack, 3.7% projected ownership. Like, the Jets are a decent defensive team. They don't have the defensive issues like the Rangers do, and they have Connor Hellebuck, who, like, this is one of the best goalie matchups of the season. I'd be more likely to go to Winnipeg 1 here just because the Rangers defensively are atrocious. I'm fine with the Rangers top line because you can kind of get to the Jets on the power play, and the Rangers have a very good one. So for that reason, I would go to Rangers 1. But I think my favorite play in this game is Winnipeg 1. And honestly, it's probably MME only. But until the Rangers change their D pairings, like, stacking against the Rangers is going to be a thing going forward.
Yeah, I will say, generally speaking, I like the Winnipeg side here more than I like the Rangers side. I don't just want to just slander the Rangers here. I do have a little bit of thought process behind it. One thing that can dictate goals against is shot distance. Like, obviously, the closer you are to the net, the better chance you have of beating the goalie because, rebounds are closer to the net, whether you can get a deflection. It just, wrist shots from 25 feet as opposed to wrist shots from 45 feet make a big difference for a goalie's reaction time, all those types of things. What if I told you, you would probably actually believe this.
Oh, yeah.
What if I told you that this season, the goalie with the closest average shot distance faced is Igor Shesterkin at 31.6 feet, and the goalie with the furthest average shot distance faced is Connor Hellebuck at 39.5 feet. The average shot distance difference between the two goalies is 8 feet. It is nuts how wide of a gulf it is, and it speaks to how bad this Rangers team has been defensively. And the thing is, I don't think the Rangers are a bad defensive team. I think I agree with you. The way that they're deploying their defensemen in particular make them a bad defensive. Like, Schneider should be back with Trouba, and Ryan Lindgren should not see the ice again until something changes. Like, seriously, you can't play Ryan Lindgren anymore. He's Matthew Dumba-esque, to put it. And I don't even think he has near the defensive value that Dumba does.
He's just a guy.
He's not even a guy. Like, you'd be better off going with 4 forwards and 1 defenseman. I truly believe that. So for that reason, like, I really do like the Winnipeg. Like, I think Winnipeg's team defense has been really, really good. Now, the schedule hasn't been super tough, but I was looking at their last 10 games, like in Seattle, face Tampa, face Utah, face Colorado, face Dallas. Like, they have played some pretty good teams in their last 10 games, or at least some tougher situations, and they're still great defensively. I really do like Winnipeg 1. The problem I'm running into is the same problem that you mentioned, and that's the price, right? They're 20K. They're more expensive than the New Jersey lines. They're more expensive than one of the Florida lines. They're more expensive than every line except for the Matthew Tkachuk line of Florida and the Edmonton top line. So that's a little bit of a problem here. But I think Winnipeg 1 is very much in play. The Rangers are taking a lot of penalties. Not a ton. They're not like Boston, but 3.5 times shorthanded per game. League average is about 3.1. So, every couple of games they're giving up an extra power play, roughly. That's a lot. I do like Winnipeg 1 here. I think Winnipeg 2 is actually playable. And the reason I believe that is because they're going to see a fair bit of Ryan Lindgren, which is great. And they're going to avoid Trocheck and Kreider, which I think is probably going to be the Rangers' best defensive line, at least out of the top two lines, right?
Yeah.
So I was looking at Ehlers, Perfidi, and Nemesnikov. Early in the season, they were riding a hot shooting percentage, and they weren't generating very much quality. That's really turned itself around. I was looking at their last 10 games. They're at least league average by expected goals. And I think at least Perfidi and Ehlers are very talented offensively. So it doesn't surprise me that they're outscoring their expected goals mark. I think Winnipeg, too, is also in play here. And they're 13.6, 1.9% top two stack. You still get Ehlers on the top power play unit. Ice time is a problem. They're probably only going to play 14 to 16 minutes. But I think if you don't want to pay up all the way for Winnipeg 1, I think Winnipeg 2 is definitely in play. On the Rangers side, I would probably go to the Trocheck line, Trocheck and Kreider and Riley Smith, just because Trocheck is getting a lot of ice time. And I think if they're going to be Connor Hellebuck, they're going to have to get to the net. And the guy that's getting to the net is Chris Kreider and sometimes Vincent Trocheck. It's not going to be Panarin or Zibanejad. Those guys don't come within 15 feet of the net. So, yeah. So I think if anything on the Rangers side, it would be the Trocheck line, but I like the Winnipeg side better. Winnipeg 1 obviously is my favorite play, but I think Winnipeg 2 is definitely playable if you don't want to pay $20K for the top line.
Yeah, and let's not forget Rangers legend Vladislav Nemestikov back in Madison Square Garden. His time there, turbulent, we'll say. New Jersey Devils, I feel so much better now. New Jersey Devils with a 3.1 total heading into Florida. The Panthers have a 3.3. News for the Devils, they flip-flop Stefan Nason and Dawson Mercer. So their lines are now Hughes, Bratt, Palat, Heischer, Nason, and then Mercer, Halla, Cotter. Florida status quo because they've won 7 in a row. That rhymes. I didn't even mean to do that. But Sam Reinhart, Barkov, Erod, Kachuk, Verhaeghe, Bennett, and then Lundell, Oosterine, and Jesper Boquist. This is an interesting game. Both these teams are very good defensively. Both these teams have a very good penalty kill. Florida's just not taking penalties either. And that's a big change from last year. So, Hughes, Bratt, Palat is the same price of Nylander, Tavares, and McMahon. Toronto has a higher top two stack percentage. They have higher ownership. But Toronto's in a much better spot than here because Toronto's in a great power play spot. This is a pretty awful power play spot for the Devils. And that line's going to see a fair Barkov, which is nightmare fuel. So I don't have a ton of interest in the Devils here. I won't say no to a Hughes one-off, but it's expensive. Like a Stefan Nason one-off, I think is fine. But my interest is on the Florida side here, the home team. And specifically, it's the Barkov, Reinhart, Erod line. That line's going to see a fair bit of Hughes, Bratt, Palat. I think that's the better matchup 5-on-5. Not that it's a huge deal. Barkov, Reinhart, Rodriguez just have a great sample going back to last year. And they're $2,400 cheaper than the Kachuk, Verhaeghe, Bennett line, which is important here because despite the Kachuk line having a higher top two stack percentage, the minutes aren't there comparative to the Barkov. Like, if they're going to play the same minutes or around the same minutes, I'm saving the 2,400 and I'm playing Barkov, Reinhart, Rodriguez, 11.5% top two stack percentage, 7.2% projected ownership, 18.5. That's perfectly fine. Again, it's not a great power play matchup on either side, but that Barkov line is so good 5-on-5, and they have a decent 5-on-5 matchup. So the line I like most in this game is Barkov, Reinhart, Rodriguez.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. On the Florida side, I did write up the Florida top line in the picks article today. Going back to last season, that top line, 5.3 goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 in 400 minutes together. It's like double the league average. It's preposterous. Now, they're riding hot shooting percentages, but honestly, it feels like Sam Reinhart's been riding hot shooting percentage for like 2 years, and it's like maybe this is just who he is
out of
now.
Buffalo.
Yeah, that too. The minutes concerns are real. I was looking at the 5 games since Barkov came back. Basically, the difference between their first line and third line at even strength is like 2 minutes per game. And where Florida's not drawing a ton of power plays and they're also not taking a ton of penalties, there's not a lot of special teams time, right? So like Barkov and Reinhart, where we used to expect like 21 minutes, it's been closer to like 19. Now, I will also say they've won 5 games in a row by a combined score of 20. It was like 24-13 or something like that. So like they played a few blowouts. Maybe that's just kind of playing into it. That would be the concern, is like there are definite ice time issues for Florida. But the thing is like I think the ice time issues are even worse for that Matt Tkachuk line. Like Matthew Tkachuk is averaging 17-17 per game so far this season. Remember, he missed a bunch of games because he was sick, but only 2 out of his 10 games, he's played at least 18 minutes. That's just not a lot of ice time when you're trying to get me to pay over $20K for a line, especially where Sam Bennett, like, God bless Sam Bennett. We like him. I don't like him at 6,800 and more expensive than Alexander Barkov like him. I would rather just go to Florida 1. At least you have a pretty good idea that Reinhart and Barkov are going to play 18 to 20 minutes. Like nobody from Florida's second line might play 18 minutes here tonight. Like that's a worry. I kind of like the New Jersey side here. I did write up Jack Hughes in the picks article. He had a slow start to the season. Obviously, he's been a lot better lately. And what I noticed is that in the last 10 games, it's like 7.5 shot attempts per game, which is an increase of like 35% from the early portions of the season. Remember, they were in Europe and then came back and had a tough schedule out of the gate. Like, God bless Nico Hischier for doing what he did. But it certainly seems as if Jack Hughes has kind of turned his season around. Hughes and Bratt and Palat have been pretty good offensively so far this season. They're sitting at 3.3 expected goals per 60. They're not that expensive. 17,700, under 10% ownership. They get Spencer Knight. Now, Spencer Knight's supposed to be a good goalie. He's had some off-ice issues that caused him to miss basically a lot of time, like a full year. It's off to a fine start this season, but until he's proven himself, I can't expect him to be much more than an average NHL goalie. So I think Hughes, Bratt, and Platt is kind of where I would go. I think both teams, both top 2 lines are in play here, but I would lean the Barkov line primarily, but I do think Hughes, Bratt, and Platt is interesting in this game here tonight, especially if Spencer Knight is not at the top of his game.
Yeah, I mean, this had similar vibes to the Carolina-Vegas game yesterday. Like, it's going to be a really good hockey game. I just don't know if there's going to be a slate-breaking DFS performance coming from it. And, of course, Eric Robinson was the nuts, but I don't think anyone played him because Mason Marchment scored, 700 DK points. And like you said at the beginning of the show, you'd have to leave, 3 small countries on the table if you were going to play, Dallas 2 and Carolina 2. But, yeah, I mean, it's like my point on short slates. When you don't know what goalie to play, just go with the cheapest one. And, the Jack Hughes line is the cheapest of the top 6 lines on either side. So, I'd never say no to Jack Hughes, except when he's playing the Rangers. Boston Bruins, first game of This Game Sucks of the night. Boston Bruins with a 3 total heading into St. Louis. The Blues have a 2.4 total. Do you know how low 2.4 has to be when you're playing the most penalized team in the league? They're not good defensively. Taking the most penalties in the league, they've been bad. Saddling the Blues with a 2.4 total. Blues are going Kyrou Buchnevich, Neighbors, Shen, Holloway, Matthias Joseph. That's probably why they have a 2.4 total. Boston going Pasternak, Zacha, Morgan, Geeky, Lindholm, Marchand, Brazeau. Oh, boy. There is some heavy ownership on Pasternak, Zacha, Geeky here. 17.7% projected ownership, a little bit higher than Toronto here. They are $3,200 cheaper than that line. I don't know if they have a sample last year with Geeky. I've always been a Geeky family fan. There's so many of them, and they're all similar type players. I think Geeky is more useful up there than Tyler Johnson is at this stage in his career. Obviously, Zacha Pasternak would be the focus. Now, I played them the other night against the Sens, and we both watched that game. In the final 31 minutes of that game, Boston had one shot on goal. One. And there was overtime. One. From the middle of the second period to the end of the game, one shot on goal. And I'm pretty sure it was like Mark Kastelik. Are the Blues the answer for that hangover? Maybe. But, like, that is some scary stuff, man. Like, they could not create diddly squat against the Sens, who aren't a good defensive team. Do I want to play this line at that ownership? I don't think so. I'll never say no to a Pasternak one-off. But I just, until they, I don't know what they need to do. Maybe just throw everyone off the team except for Pasternak and then, like, rebuild. But, like, I don't know. Like, Pasternak one-off is probably the only thing that I'm okay with on the Boston side. You want to throw Zacha in, get a two-man, be my guest. But, like, I'm not, at this ownership, I'm not super high on Boston here. The Blues top line is interesting. They're fully correlated. Now, what is fully correlated? I mean, in this matchup, they haven't scored a power play goal since Rob Thomas got hurt. But the Bruins are taking the most penalties in the league. It's like an egregious amount of penalties. So, like, I'll take a shot at Kyrou Buchnevich Neighbors. It's one of the best iterations of the line that they can put together. Like, I know I was kind of off them the other night with Shen up there, but, like, Neighbors at least will get to the net. You know what I mean? He's like, he got to the greasy areas. They're $300 cheaper than Boston won. They're going to see a fair bit of power play time. Whether they capitalize on that is a different question, but, like, if they hit their over on their team total, which is 2.4, which means they'll have to score 3 goals, I find it insanely hard for them not to be involved in at least 2 of them if they score 3 goals. You know what I mean? So in this game, I'll probably take a stab on Kyrou Buchnevich Neighbors. Pasternak one-off, but, like, this game sucks.
I kind of like the St. Louis side here. As you mentioned, like, if they get to 3 goals, I have to think the top line is involved. Like, thank God they're kicking Colton Parayko off the power play and put Jake Neighbors back on. I don't know why they ever changed that. So that top line is perfectly correlated. And as you mentioned with Boston, they are the most penalized team in the league. 69 times shorthanded in 16 games this season. They've given up 17 power play goals against in 16 games. Now, St. Louis still has got this Blues team, man. It's crazy. St. Louis still hasn't scored a power play goal since Robert Thomas got hurt. It's like,
that's less offensive than Boston having 1 shot on goal in half the game against the Sens.
It's nuts. But earlier I was talking about Toronto, how they were putting up good shot metrics but not scoring on the power play. The Blues are kind of doing the same thing. They're at 53.8. The top power play unit is at 53.8 shots per 60 minutes on the power play without Robert Thomas in the lineup. That's about league average. It's not great. It's not elite or anything like that, but the league average shot rate, due for some positive regression because they haven't scored against a team taking by far the most penalties in the league. I have some interest in St. Louis one here. Like, I don't think the Blues are a good team. but they did load. It is a perfectly correlated top line that is not expensive, right? Like, how often are you going to get a perfectly correlated top line at 14,200 with Pavel Buchnevich and Jordan Kyrou on it at home against the most penalized team in the NHL? Like, I do have some interest in St. Louis here. They're one of the low-owned spots that I'm really considering here tonight. On the Boston side, it's like this is a great matchup for the Bruins. Now, here's the thing: is I was looking at some of because Boston has improved as the season's gone on. Like we do have to give them credit for that. But the thing is all their improvements have come defensively. It hasn't been offensively. Offensively, it's still not very good. I also thought it was interesting. We saw that interview with David Pastrnak saying he played in the World Championships last year injured and was limited in his offseason training because of that injury. Now, how much it's actually affecting him, I don't know. I was looking at his skating data earlier. His skating data is pretty much in line with last year, so I don't think it's really hurting him. I just think it's the rest of the team that's hurting him. But St. Louis doesn't take a ton of penalties. The penalty kill is bad. The Bruins finally kicked Charlie McAvoy off the top power play unit. I would probably do some sort of power play stack. Pastrnak, Zacha, Marchand specifically is something that sticks out to me. But it is a really good matchup for the Bruins. There is a lot of ownership on the top line at 17.7%. I think you're fine kicking off Geeky and putting on Marchand or something like that. Like, I don't even like Geeky's been a healthy scratch. He hasn't been good this season. Like, they're trying anything on the top line. Like, I honestly, like, we're probably going to see Trent. Like, if this isn't 3-0 Boston by the middle of the second period, we're going to see like John Beecher top line or Mark Kaslick top line. Like, that's what it's going to get.
Best option.
Right. I would just focus on the power play guys. So I would do some sort of like Pastrnak, Zacha, Marchand, Pastrnak, Zacha, like I guess Elias Lindholm, but Pastrnak, Zacha, and Marchand is what sticks out to me because the Blues penalty kill has really just not been very good.
Oh, if you were I have no idea if I'm going to watch this game. It depends if I'm in a mood for punishment or not. But it's going to be a brutal game to watch. New York Islanders, speaking of bad games to watch, New York Islanders with a 2.5 total. Heading into Edmonton, the Oilers have a 3.5 total. If you've ever been a fan of I Think You Should Leave, this is how I think of the Islanders top line. You have Dobson doing his part. We have Brock Nelson doing his part. Horvat Lee and John J. Peugeot, we didn't do fucking shit. Yet they have been because they're riding a hot streak here with their shooting percentage, but they're creating nothing. There's no creation there. They're just riding a percentage. And this is a pretty brutal matchup, like 14,700 at 6%. I'd rather just go take a chance on the Blues and their 2.4 total.
Yeah.
I don't have a ton of interest in the Islanders top line. I know they've been good recently in terms of their box scores. You dig, as Cliffy says, you look under the hood and it is a disaster. They are creating nothing. So I'm out on the Horvat line. If I'm going to play a line from the Islanders, it'd be Nelson, Palmieri, Sipelkoff. Don't have a ton of interest in the Islanders in single entry. Again, like I'd rather just go play the Blues. The Blues have a lower total, but they're at home and they have one line. So like they're a little bit more concentrated with the scoring. I'm pretty much out in the single entry on the Islanders. Edmonton is a little bit of a different story. McDavid, Hyman, Skinner, Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin. Now, Edmonton 1 is 20,100. The Islanders don't take penalties. They are the second lowest penalized team in the league, I believe, besides Vegas, if I'm remembering correctly. If you guys can even hear what I'm saying.
No, you're right.
So yes.
Yeah, you're
yeah. The issue is their penalty kill sucks. So like, and you have a McDavid line. Like, yeah, 12.3% on a 7-game slate isn't low, But like for McDavid line, it's fairly low. I kind of like Edmonton 1 here. It is Sorokin in net. Like there is a world-class goalie night. Like there's actual goalie choices to make tonight instead of just like slamming in like a mispriced Hellebuck on the road at like 6,800. But like I do like Edmonton 1 here in a nutshell. I think I'd rather play Winnipeg 1 just because the Rangers are god-awful defensively. But I'll never say no to a McDavid line. Now, Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin, like, yes, Podkolzin and Draisaitl have played pretty well together. I'd just go to McDavid here. Like, if the Islanders were taking more penalties, I'd say you could do some sort of power play stack, but, like, they just aren't. So it would be Edmonton 1 for me, Islanders 2, but it's not my favorite game for single entry.
Yeah, for the Islanders, that top line is generating like shot attempts, not a ton of expected goals. I will also say it depends which site you use. Like different sites have different measures for expected goals. So by some they're pretty low, by others they're a little bit higher. The issue is like, yes, the Islanders don't take penalties, but the Oilers don't take a ton of penalties either. They're the 5th least penalized team in the NHL. The funny thing about these two teams is that neither of them are taking penalties, and neither of them are really allowing a lot of shots on the penalty kill. Like that's the other thing. Shots on the penalty kill this season, or shot attempts. Sorry, the Oilers are 3rd fewest, and the Islanders are 8th fewest. The thing is on the penalty kill, the Oilers have the 3rd worst save percentage, and the Islanders have the 4th worst save percentage.
Good time.
Yeah, you got to think those things regress positively because they are far too low for where they should be over the balance of a full season. So I would focus most at 5-on-5 here, and if I'm going to focus more 5-on-5, I agree with you on Islanders too. Like they have just been really, really good. Honestly, 3.6 expected goals, 3.8 actual goals per 60 minutes. They're all in the same power play unit, 14,100. They're probably going to avoid the Bouchard Ekholm pairing for the most part. And I think that's the most important matchup to miss. I like Ty Emberson. I like Brett Kulak. The second pair is, take it or leave it, I guess. But I think that Islanders second line is going to avoid Ekholm Bouchard for the most part. And I think that's the most important part. It is the Edmonton side that I do. But the thing is like, I agree with you. Like they're at a price point where I think there are other lines that I would rather go play. In fact, there's one in the next game we'll talk about. Ottawa's, less than $2,000 more expensive. It is more expensive, but I'd rather go there. I'd rather go to Boston or especially St. Louis for lower ownership. Like there are just other spots in that price range. On the Edmonton side, I think you're fine to just play an even strength line. I'm not going to lie. I don't hate the idea of Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin because, as you mentioned, it's not a good power play spot. Like, as long as the Islanders goalies don't give up, 30% of their shots against as goals on the PK, like they should be fine. And Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin, especially Draisaitl and Podkolzin, have been good this year. 3.2 expected goals for, 2.3 against, 71 shot attempts for, 45 against. So, like, they're really controlling the play. And where it's not a great power play spot, I think you should focus more on the 5-on-5 lines, and that's Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin. I don't think Jeff Skinner lasts the whole game on the top line. There have been a couple times where he's been on the top line and been back down on the third line by the middle of the third period. I would go Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin. I think it's both second lines in this game for me, but I'm going to be honest, like I kind of agree with you. It's not my favorite game to target for tournaments.
Yeah. It's always scary to say McDavid's not my favorite, and he'll just, do his thing. But sometimes you got to do it. Calgary Flames with a 2.5 total. Heading into Vancouver, the Canucks have a 3.5 total. Calgary is back-to-back on the road, and Wolf started last night, so it's going to be our pal Dan V starting for the Flames. Miller, Suter, and Jonathan Lekkerimaki got called up. That's a line. I'm going to have a hard time not calling him Letterkenny. That's the first thing that comes to mind when I see his name. But then Pettersson, Garland, DeBrusque, That Patterson Garland DeBrusque line is the most projected own line of the night. They're 13-6, 10.1% top two stack, 22.4% projected ownership. That is large. I will say Patterson and Garland have played pretty well together so far this season. At 13-6, like they're okay, I guess. That ownership is crazy. If you happen to just be like Toronto 2, Vancouver 2, defenseman goalie, and you're like, wow, this fits like a glove, you're probably not the only one. I'm kind of okay with Patterson Garland here, but I'm going to take the lower ownership and the cheaper line and go Miller, Suter, Letterkenny at 12-1. They have 10% projected ownership, but I think you just full stack that line. Like, obviously, Miller and Suter are going to get their ownership. I'm not sure Lekkerimaki is going to get a ton. I think you just full stack that line. It's a good 5-on-5 matchup. It's a good power play matchup. You get Miller and Suter there. If you want to go to Patterson Garland, that's fine. Just be aware of who you put them with, and especially if you're in large field tournaments looking for unique ceiling lineups. Single entry, you play your guys, but I'm fine with either of the Vancouver lines. I'd lean towards Miller Suter. On the Calgary side, this is a not the best matchup in the world, especially back-to-back on the road. I probably, if you're going to do anything on Calgary, just go to Coleman back on Coronado at 11-5, but again, that's MME only if they happen to get into my, optimizer.
Yeah, Miller, Suter, Lekkerimaki is the line that really caught my eye. One, because, as you mentioned, there's just absolutely bananas ownership on the Pettersson line. They're at 22.4%. The Miller line's less than half that. Obviously, the top two stack percentage is lower, but, Miller, Suter have generally played well together whenever they've had, their limited time together. Miller and Suter both on the power play. So, there's two guys on each of the top two lines on the top power play, and Miller and Suter are both there as well. The other thing is we talk about it over and over and over. Miller, 60%, depending on the game, 65% of his ice time will come with Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronek, with that pair on the ice. That is really, really important because Quinn Hughes has been arguably the best defenseman in the NHL so far this season. And, certainly like a top three defenseman since the start of last season. It is really, really important to have Quinn Hughes on the ice. And they're going to go up against that Nazem Kadri line, and Kadri and Sharangovich have just been bad defensively whenever they play together, like below average by expected goals against, below average by actual goals against. I think that Miller line is going to be able to run over, especially with Hughes playing behind them, is going to be able to run over that Kadri line. So I really like Miller, Suter, Lekkerimaki here. If you want to turn into a power play stack, take off Lekkerimaki and put on Pettersson or Garland or something like that. I think that's fine because the Calgary penalty kill has been on a bit of a slide lately. I don't think they had a penalty kill last night. I don't think Los Angeles drew a single power play. So, if that happens, that sucks. But the Calgary PK since early in the season has been on a fairly sizable slide. So I think a power play stack is viable, but Miller, Suter, Lekkerimaki really stands out. And Lekkerimaki, this guy is a legit prospect. I was looking at his AHL numbers so far this season. 7 games, it's 39 shots on goal. Literally 5 shots per game. It's nuts. And I was reading some of the, because I do some writing over at Elite Prospects. I was reading up their draft profile of him. His top statistical comparison, and I know people slander him now, but he was once, a high-end offensive player, is Mika Zibanejad. Obviously, Lekkerimaki not going to be that from game one of the NHL season, but it kind of tells us of his career, but it tells us there is upside to his game. So I really do like Miller, Suter, Lekkerimaki here. Either Vancouver line is fine. Either one is very much in play. I'll just go with the cheaper line that's getting half the ownership and has as many guys on the top power play unit. That's just kind of the way that I look at it, and has a better 5-on-5 matchup to boot. Nothing for me from Vancouver. I agree with you. Backlund, Coleman, Coronado, because I think they're going to miss the Miller line for the most part. That would be the line that I would go to if I do play Calgary, but single entry 3 max, it's just a hard pass for me. This is a pretty bad matchup for the Flames.
Yeah. I can't believe I like this game, but final game of the night, late hammer season, Columbus Blue Jackets with a 2.9 total heading into Seattle. The Kraken have a 3.5 total. The Kraken are tied for the highest total on the slate with Vancouver and Edmonton. Like, okay. And Columbus has the highest road total on the slate outside of Boston. And Columbus is going Monahan, Marchenko, Fantilli, Chinnikov, Sillinger, Voronkov. Seattle going McCann, Beniers, Eberle, Bjorkstrand, Stevenson, Schwartz, Wright, Tolvin, and Burakovsky, but they mixed up their power play units again. Not that like their power play units have been some like mystical creature, but like this is a really, really good power play spot, and it kind of sucks because Beniers, McCann, Eberle were fully correlated, but they moved Beniers off. Why? I don't know. Like he hasn't been great to start this season, but I don't know. That would be the Seattle line I'd go to. McCann, Beniers, Eberle, 15,100, 6.4% top two stack, 8% projected ownership. They'll at least get their minutes. Like, the minutes in Seattle. What is that? They'll at least play their 16. The other lines, like Bjorkstrand and Stevenson, Schwartz are getting so much ownership at 9,900. 12.2% projected ownership, and it's not like you need to jam a Colorado power play stack in here tonight. The only really expensive lines are like Winnipeg, Florida 2, and Edmonton. So unless you're doing like an Edmonton power play stack, and it's not the best power play matchup we've ever seen, I'm not sure why you would 12.2% owned Chandler Stevenson line in this economy is going to be a pass for me. I'd just go to McCann, Beniers, Eberle here. It is a really good power play matchup. The full correlation not being there kind of sucks, but like that McCann Eberle unit was pretty bad anyway. So like what? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I'm fine with the Tolvin in one off as well, a Burakovsky one off, something like that, but it would be McCann, Beniers, Eberle. On the Columbus side, it's honestly more interesting to me. If you want to play Monahan, Marchenko, Fantilli, I think that's fine because they'll see a fair bit of their time with Werenski and Provorov. But the line that does interest me more is Sillinger, Chinnikov, Voronkov. Chinnikov, Voronkov have played together a lot with Marchenko last season. Obviously, it's a different coach, but they were very good in that sample. Sillinger is what he is, but like they play him. He's kind of like Josh Norris in the sense that he has a role on this team and he's going to fulfill that role. So for 12,900 at 4.8% projected ownership, I prefer Chinnikov, Sillinger, Voronkov. I think at this stage in their careers, Chinnikov is the best winger on this team. Voronkov was a very good player last year. He was hurt to start this season. Being with Chinnikov is a nice boost. It would be Columbus 2 and Seattle 1. I do think Monahan, Marchenko, Fantilli is fine, but you're saving 4,300 by going down to Sillinger, Chinnikov, Voronkov. So depending on your build, like Monahan, Marchenko, Fantilli is fine, but I prefer Chinnikov, Sillinger, Voronkov.
Yeah, I'll start on the Seattle side. I did write up that Seattle top line in the picks article today. They have been scoring this season. They're at 2.8 goals per 60 over the last two seasons. And what I note in the article is that 2.8 goals per 60 at 5-on-5, it's above average, but it's not like great or anything. But it's 45% higher than when they're off the ice. Like this team just hasn't been scoring since the start of last year. So they have been the best offensive line. There's not a ton of ownership coming in on them, as you mentioned, 8%, 6.4% top two stack. I think they are one of those minute price lines that are in play. I think a Tolvin in one off kind of makes sense. He's been getting a power play role. We know he can score. He's not that expensive. He's one of those salary savings. Him and Bjorkstrand are kind of like two of the depth one-offs that I do like. Bjorkstrand's projecting very well at Stochastic for 3,700 on DK, even though he might only play 14, 15 minutes. So Bjorkstrand, Tolvin, and one-offs, I think, is fine. Full stack, it's McCann, Beniers, Eberle. Like McCann and Eberle have been the team's two best players, at least forward so far this season. So like, if I'm gonna stack anything from a team, I'll take the the line that has the two best forwards on it, right? I think that's pretty straightforward. So I think that Seattle top line is fine. I agree that the Columbus side is more interesting to me here. We were talking before the show, and we were talking about Columbus and noticing that Columbus has gone 6 straight games scoring 2 or fewer goals per game. That's not good, obviously. But when I was looking at those 6 games, in that stretch, Columbus is 4th in the league in shots per minute, 5th in the league by expected goals, and 7th in the league by high danger shots per minute. They're last by shooting percentage. And like, it's like those things happen, right? Like sometimes you do generate and you do generate well and you just don't score a ton of goals. I mean, think of like, they're not obviously not the Edmonton Oilers, but think of the Edmonton Oilers through the first 6 weeks of the season last year. Like it was the same problem. Like they were generating well, they just weren't scoring. Then they went bananas over the final 4 months. Columbus isn't going to do that. But again, I think it's one of those things where they are doing a lot of good things under the hood. And I think it's going to lead to some success. And it's not like Seattle's some like great, defensive juggernaut or anything. Like especially the penalty kill. The penalty kill has not been good. At 5-on-5 this season, Seattle is allowing 28.4 shots per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 this season. The team right behind them is the Chicago Blackhawks. So like if this was Columbus going into Chicago, think of how that might change your perception of this game. I think both Columbus top lines are in play. I agree with you on Chinakhov, Sillinger, Voronkov. I was looking at the numbers for Voronkov and Chinakhov whenever they played with anybody but Marchenko. 72 shot attempts, 3.3 expected goals, 4.4 actual goals per 60 minutes, 5-on-5. Like that's really good. And again, Sillinger on the top power play unit, 12,900 for that Columbus second line, 4.8% ownership, 3.2% top 2 stack. Like if you're playing Devils, Florida, Rangers, expensive lines, somewhere like that, I think this is one of those filler stacks that you can put in with them. Now, I think Monahan, Marchenko, Fantilli is fine. I do think they're a little bit overpriced. But Seattle's penalty kill has not been good. Marchenko, Monahan, both on the top power play. I think Columbus one is in play. They're fine. If I was 150 maxing, certainly I would have a little bit of them. But it is Columbus 2 that I do have more interest in this game because their price is at a point where you can stuff them in with an expensive line elsewhere. You get 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play unit, and Chinakhov and Voronkov have generally played well together. I am more interested in the Columbus side. In this game, I would go Columbus 2, Seattle 1, Columbus 1. I think there are at least 3 lines that are in play in this game.
Yeah, and, I know there's going to be one person be like, yeah, but Seattle has the biggest total on the slate. And you guys talked up the Blues who have the lowest. The Blues are a concentrated team on the top line. If the Seattle goes over their team total 3.5, scoring 4 goals, each of these lines could have 1 goal. So like stacking Seattle is a chore in itself, trying to figure out what line you want to use. So like, yeah, I like Seattle in a nutshell, but it's just between the minutes, the coaching, and who you're going to go to, like, I'm taking my chances with Columbus here. Let's talk a little bit about defensemen. They're better to talk to than goalies, but still. Werenski at the top of the board, then Quinn Hughes, Rasmus Anderson, Noah Dobson, Dougie Hamilton, Evan Bouchard, Brandon Montour. Now, I did just talk shit about the Kraken, their skaters. I do like Montour here. He has been probably the best offseason defenseman signing. Like I know Sergachev got traded, but Montour has, he had a little bit of a rough season in Florida last year. He has looked very good there. I'm fine with Werenski at 7,500. Like his last 5 games, he's played 25, 31, 27, and 27 minutes. That is a boatload of minutes. I'm certainly fine there. It is a good power play matchup for Columbus. I think this is a decent spot for Quinn Hughes. Like 7K is a little bit pricey, but he has been shooting the puck more. He has 49 shots in 13 games. That is probably one of his best stretches shooting the puck in his career. So I'm fine with him at 7K. I know it's not an ideal power play matchup, but from a minute standpoint, Noah Dobson is fine as well. He's been playing upwards of 28 minutes, 28 plus, like 4 of the last 5 games. So, like, there is some spend up options here. I normally don't spend up, but I might be tonight. Who you liking up there?
Yeah, I think this is a good night to spend up on defense, because I also think it's a good night to punt on defense. So I think you can do like a, somewhere between 6 and 7,500 or whatever for one guy, and then like a 3K guy beside him or something like that. I wrote up Evan Bouchard in the picks article. He's still shooting the puck a lot. He's missing the net, I think, too much considering his profile. He's over 2 shots and 2 blocks per game. Like, this guy, he can bring it across the board. I really like Bouchard. Werenski is at the top of the fantasy projections. That's stochastic for defensemen. And of the expensive defensemen, he's also at the top for point per dollar value. So you're talking about Werenski's minutes. And I think with this matchup too, I really do like Werenski. Quinn Hughes, I have number 3. I think, it is a pretty good matchup. He has been shooting a lot. Like, it feels like we should keep playing him as long as he keeps shooting until that starts falling off. Noah Dobson is interesting because it's not a good matchup, but he is getting a ton of minutes. Like, he could probably play 27 minutes here tonight. It's just like, what's the quality of those minutes? Because he hasn't really been blocking very many shots, and not even very many shots considering how much ice time he's getting, right? Like, it is a little bit of a concern, especially if you're using him on DK. Of course, Brandon Montour's in play, but I think Bouchard, Werenski, and Hughes are at the top of the list for me. There's not a lot in the mid-price range, like Morrissey for sure for Winnipeg, Thomas Chabot, perfectly fine for Ottawa. Morgan Riley running the power play for the Leafs. Justin Falk, now that he's the lone top power play guy, I think he's in play for St. Louis, although his peripherals have been a little wonky as well. But like I said, I think there are a bunch of cheap defensemen in play. Like, Hampus Lindholm is running the top power play unit for Boston now. He's under 4K. Louis Balinskis still running the top power play for Florida. Minutes might be a little bit of a concern, but he's under 3K. Riker Evans getting power play time for Seattle. He's been the number 2 defenseman behind Brandon Montour for a couple weeks now, getting like 22, 23 minutes a game. He's under 4K. Dmitry Miromanov played over 20 minutes last night for Calgary. He's been like 19, 20 minutes for like a couple weeks now. He's under 3K. Scott Perunovich, Boston takes a ton of penalties. He's getting some secondary power play time at least. Like, he's under 3K. Like, there are a lot of defensemen, I think, under the 4K range that you can play here tonight. That's why I like the idea of like one expensive, one punt type thing here.
Yeah, Isaiah George is the other guy I'd mentioned too. 2,700. His last 2 games, 23 minutes, 24 minutes. He plays with Dobson. So
I don't know why I didn't mention him, considering I wrote him up in the article.
So it's a long season. Who's more blind, Cutter or Bouchard? It is a contest. I think Cutter is a little bit more blind right now. I think he's closing his eyes and just shooting at the net. Gabagool had a really good question that I meant to get to, and then I forgot because I've been riled up for the past hour. Could I get some analysis on 2 stacks, same game? Any upside to that? Or are you capping upside my melting minutes on the ice? So game stacking is definitely viable, especially on a medium-sized slate like this. The one thing I would give you some caution at is taking lines that are going up against each other. They're going to kind of cannibalize their minutes. So, you do something like in the late game or any of the games, you take like Toronto 2 is gonna avoid, the Brady Tkachuk line. So you do, I know you can't fit it unless you have Jake's Onyx salary cap, but you do like Toronto 2 and Ottawa 1, like lines not going up against each other 5-on-5 because they will cannibalize each other. I think game stacking is fine, especially on this slate. On a 13-14 game slate, something like that, a bigger slate, I try not to game stack, but I certainly think it's viable.
Yeah, not a lot to add. Just the same thing. It's like, once we get to like 11 game, 12 game slates, I probably won't do it because there are just so many viable paths that I think it's just kind of too thin. But, basically anything under like 9 games, I think is perfectly fine.
Yep. Let's talk about those aliens who live in between the pipes on the ice. top of the board, the 8K range. Kevin Lankinen, Anthony Stolarz, Joey Decord, Jeremy Swayman, Stewie Skinner. I think if I was going to spend in that range, it would be Skinner and Lankinen. I think Decord is fine, because, as you mentioned, Columbus has had shooting percentage issues, but I don't particularly love the top range. I do like both Shesterkin and Hellebuck. I know it's a 6 total, but if these teams win, specifically Igor Shesterkin, like, he is going to have to be on his game. That would be the guy I would go to. I think Hellebuck is fine, just because, like you mentioned, he sees the furthest distance per shot per game. I think if you're spending down, it's not ideal, but like, I don't mind Sorokin. I don't mind Binnington, because Boston's had a ton of problems scoring. The issue I worry about with Binnington is the volume he's going to see. I don't even mind Merzlikins, honestly, but I'm going to live in the mid-range with Shesterkin and Hellebuck, and I don't even mind Markstrom.
Yeah, Shesterkin was the guy that I wrote up just because of all the shot volume. But, I also wrote up that I think it's 10 starts so far. Half of them have had at least 24 DK points, and then 2 of them have been negative DK points. Live by the sword, die by the sword when you have such a bad defensive team in front of them. I think Sorokin very much in play as well. I'll always at least consider him when he's at 7,400, like under 7,500, basically. The expensive guy that I would probably go to is Stolarz. He's largely been pretty good this season. Ottawa is still having trouble scoring at 5-on-5. So, like, as long as the Toronto penalty kill doesn't melt down, I think he should be fine. If you're worried about the Toronto penalty kill melting down, like, I would just pay the extra $100 for Kevin Lankinen then.
I sometimes stack a team top 2 lines. Thoughts on that? It's called the Josh stack. But I think the shorter the slate, the shorter the field, it's more viable. I have ceiling concerns in 150 max GPPs. I think that's kind of like, if you want to get like crazy in a qualifier or a single entry, you can do that. But like 7-game slate, I'd rather at most just power play stack.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't mind Josh stack. I honestly would especially on a big slate, like a 12-game slate, I would prefer a Josh stack over a game stack, honestly, and just hope that I hit the team that scores 7 goals or something like that. But yeah, it's perfectly fine. No issues with it. Like I've already done it once this season. I'll probably do it a few more times this season, especially on shorter slates. So yeah, 6-7 games.
Yeah. Who do you like for your hat trick pick?
Going to Vancouver. Holiday seasons is approaching, so I'm going with Connor Garland.
My Christmas tree's up. Decorations are up. They were just decorating outside. I like that reference. I really want to go to the Blues here, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go Yegor Chinakhov.
I like it. I do. We both like the Blue Jackets tonight. Hopefully this doesn't lead to a 6-0 Kraken win.
It will. So we'll just be tomorrow on the show. Just didn't work. But yeah, we will be back tomorrow. I am questionable for the show tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to make it back in time. If I'm not back in time, Cliffy will take you solo. It is a 5-game slate, so I would feel bad saddling him with a 14-game slate, but 5, I don't feel as bad. If I'm back tomorrow, I will be on the show, but good luck, everybody, tonight. If I don't see you tomorrow, I'll see you Thursday. Cliffy will see you tomorrow. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck tonight, everyone.